The next 9 minutes will reveal exactly what caused record high inflation and help you see what is likely to occur next. Code 3 Americans, in this video, we're going to show you how inflation reached 4-decade highs. We're going to have it mapped out where it's easy to understand, so you can see the cause and effect relationships, so that maybe you can understand what you can do, what opportunities you can look for, or what things you can look out for to get out of the way. So this Venn diagram illustrates some cause and effect relationships relative to policy decisions that the federal government implemented. So in 2020, the Federal Reserve stepped in and immediately started taking action on a few key things that had tremendous ripple effects throughout the economy. We'll break them down one at a time. First, the Federal Reserve started buying $80 billion in treasuries a month, which essentially became the spending power of the government. The government then could use that money to send out stimulus checks directly to the people, which ultimately ends up in bank accounts, increases purchasing power in the real economy. The Fed quickly called an emergency meeting and dropped interest rates to about zero. They did this in a couple ways. First, they dropped their overnight Fed funds rate to about zero, and they also committed to buying $80 billion a month in U.S. Treasuries. Let me show you why that works. The price of a bond has an inverse relationship to the interest rate. When the price of the bond gets bid up, the interest rate falls. So when the Federal Reserve stepped in to buy $80 billion a month in treasuries, it effectively dropped the interest rate of those treasuries to very low rates. U.S. treasuries are considered to be risk-free. Commercial loans carry a risk premium that will always be over the U.S. Treasury amounts. This is because U.S. Treasuries are backed by the United States government, which has never defaulted. Since money as we know it is ultimately based on trust, Treasuries are treated as the risk-free alternative because it is believed they will be backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Other loans and investments often mimic the movement in Treasury yields, but typically require an additional premium in order to keep the capital from sitting inside the safety of Treasuries. In 2020, when the Fed increased their Treasury purchases, this not only funded government stimulus packages, it also influenced Treasury rates much lower, which simultaneously pulled down yields on other loans. Most of the money circulating in our economy is loaned into existence, so cheaper loans cause more money to flow faster through goods and services. This is referred to as increased velocity. Though real estate loans are often originated locally, they are not typically held long-term at banks. Instead, several mortgages are packaged together as mortgage-backed securities and then sold to investors in the market. Here again, investors will assign a premium since the capital is outside the safety of treasuries and exposed to the risks associated with borrowers not making timely payments. In 2020, the Federal Reserve stepped in as the buyer of mortgage-backed securities to the tune of about $40 billion per month. In effect, this removed the risk premium private lenders would otherwise assign to mortgage rates. When combined with low Treasury yields, this caused mortgage rates to become historically cheap and ultimately created a frenzy in real estate. Real estate has long been one of the best hedges against inflation, but many don't know how to evaluate the math to know a good deal from bad. Pause the video and go to code3assets.com to receive our completely free fill-in-the-blank 1 to 4 unit deal analyzer without any obligation. Now let's get back to inflation. To wrap up, let's go back to our diagram and see how massive purchasing power collided with low supply to create historically high inflation. In addition to sending out stimulus payments, the government also took actions which lowered people's monthly payments, such as not requiring them to pay mortgage or rent and delaying their requirement to pay student loans. This ultimately created more purchasing power month over month that ultimately ended up in people's bank accounts. This also helped contribute to record bank accounts in 2020 and 2021. We already illustrated how the Federal Reserve influenced low interest rates and bought $40 billion a month in mortgage-backed securities. This resulted again in cheap loans, which caused a real estate frenzy, which drove up real estate prices. This led to a lot of activity pushing into real estate, which bid up the prices, which increased asset prices in people's portfolios. This had a couple effects. On the consumer side and the investor side, cash out refinances exploded. The cash out refinances, some of them were used to extract equity. Essentially, the properties were used like a giant ATM machine. In 2020, $48 billion was extracted, and in 2021, $275 billion was extracted, which ultimately results in many people's bank accounts. On the consumer side, this also lowered monthly payments on average about $2,800 annually, which again flows through less monthly expense and more purchasing power stored in bank accounts. Bank account balances grew at a very fast rate. In 2019, checking account balances were about $13.4 trillion, but about halfway through 2022, they were about $18.5 trillion, which was about a 38% increase. Some of that money went directly out to compete for consumer goods. Some of that money went in to purchase more assets, be it Bitcoin, the stock market, real estate, and various other things. Directly held stocks increased from 21 trillion to about 31.8 trillion in just about 2 or 3 years' time. Also, real estate equity grew from $30 trillion to about $42.2 trillion, again, in a little over 2 years' time. This is called a wealth effect when people's balance sheet grows, illustrating they have a higher net worth. They're able to then take that balance sheet, use it as collateral, marry it to cheaper loans, which ultimately moves around and looks to spend on more goods and services. We've talked a lot about the demand side, but we also have to consider the supply side. Governments around the world at various degrees implemented lockdowns. This severely affected the labor supply. Shortages of labor resulted in less stuff being produced and severely disrupted the distribution systems. Whether it was lack of supply or lack of distribution, the end result was the same. There was not enough stuff. Not enough stuff created demand to build and remain high. We also have to consider the wealth effect we previously discussed. Many people were in the workforce, but the wealth effect caused their net worth to grow significantly. Many of those folks exited the workforce at a younger age than they had planned. This also caused an effect on the labor. Now, people with money and more time on their hands ultimately spent more. This increased demand as well. Also, people that didn't have as much wealth effect where they could leave the workforce did have increased purchasing power in their bank accounts and more discretionary time relative to the lockdowns. This also caused increased spending and also caused demand to build and remain high. This is a lot of moving parts, but it's worth considering what caused it all. Ultimately, it was the Federal Reserve and the federal government's actions that triggered the effects that resulted in all of this inflation. So why is that important? As we all look for a crystal ball and consider what to do, macroeconomic expert George Gammon says it well. Understanding the cause and effect relationship of all of these actions will give you a massive edge in the market to better your own portfolio and to help you identify opportunities that are to come and also look out for problems that may be coming at you. My good buddy with the real estate guys, Russ Gray, always says the flip side to every problem is an opportunity. Most people only see the Fed as raising interest rates. Though that is their primary tool and is having great effects throughout the economy, they have also taken other actions to reduce the problem. But make no mistake, the Fed's ultimate goal is to reduce excess purchasing power in bank accounts, to lower the wealth effect, and to increase unemployment so that wages quit being driven up at fast paces. During any type of volatility, having sound principles and being able to play offense and defense well is critical. To receive our 3 free reports outlining what over a decade of SWAT experience taught me about business, investing, and life, simply send an email to swat@code3assets.com. Next, be sure to watch this video to see an expert's take on exactly why opportunity is coming.